It's a special privilege to be able to host what I believe is the first commemorative activity of this 50th anniversary year of the Hungarian Revolution or uprising. And it's a real privilege to have with us such an extraordinary group of people who were part of it, both the people on our panel, let's say, and also others in the room who have stories to tell and to share. And so we're going to, we'll talk some of the people on the panel, but then I'm going to ask people to feel free to share their own experiences from that time, and then more broadly to ask the question of other people who've had experiences under other totalitarian societies and regimes, or who would like to ask questions or participate in the discussion about the role of the arts and politics generally. It's also, from our standpoint at the Annenberg School, a wonderful event to have at the time that we also have the World Press Photo Exhibit, which I hope you will all visit in our other lobby, our so-called, we call it our East Lobby. Only two places in this country have this exhibit. The other is the United Nations, and it's quite a remarkable exhibit if you have a chance to visit it. This session really was brought to me by Bob Filep, who was a graduate of the faculty of this school and was an original member of the faculty of the Annenberg School. And in fact, I have to say his fame is truly international. I was not long ago in Dubai, and at a magnificent dinner in Dubai, I'm told at the table that there's a man in Dubai, there's a man there from Saudi Arabia, who was had been the information minister of Saudi Arabia, but he was a graduate of our school in the first class of the school. I said, I must meet this man. He came over to meet me. Very successful man, now runs an international cartoon network. Graduated from this school in 1976, I think. And he said, how is Bob Filep? So it's a great pleasure, Bob, to have you with us and to start off this discussion.
Jeff, it's an honor, and I want to thank you and Jeff Baum for making this all happen, and particularly, as you pointed out, the kickoff event, as best we know, honoring or commemorating the Hungarian uprising in 1956. We, back in the autumn, my distant cousin, George Olah, rang me up and he said, Bob, he says, you have to help Eva's committee. She has some wonderful photographs of the Hungarian Revolution that I want you to come to campus and see. And we have to find a place for these on the campus. Well, I never say no to a Nobel laureate, and particularly my distant cousin. So Eva brought these wonderful photos in, some of which you see up here, that were taken by Erich Lessing. And we were immediately captured by those who knew and were there on the scene, and also myself in retrospect, the way they captured the essence of what took place in Budapest in 1956. So I set out and fortuitously got the good help of Tyson Gaskill to mount the exhibit this September of the Erich Lessing photos of the Hungarian Revolution in the main Doheny Library. And before we finish today, Tyson will tell you, as a postlude to this event, about that exhibit and the days, and encourage you to get on the invitation list so that you're well aware of what's happening. But I must share that this odyssey, and I'll speak more to my own personal experience later, was just something very, very marvelous. When I first met Eva, we were in Dr. Olah's conference room, and we were discussing the photos, and I said to her, she said to me, Mikor mente ki? And that in Hungarian means, when did you leave the country? And I said, no, I say, így születtem. I was born here in the United States. I'm Hungarian, I'm an American of Hungarian lineage, born, bred, and raised in New Brunswick, New Jersey. But then Eva starts to tell me about her exodus, and it turns out that when she came to the United States, what had been a port of embarkation for our U.S. troops, and my sister, who was a nurse at the time, an officer, and my brother also, both left the United States from Camp Kilmer, New Jersey, which is, you may remember, Joyce Kilmer was a native of that city. He wrote that beautiful poem, I Think That I Shall Never See, a poem as lovely as a tree, and they named this camp after him. Well, it was vacant in 1956, and lo and behold, that was the spot. I said to Eva, when did you come in? You asked me when I left Hungary. I'm asking you now, when did you come in and where? And she said in Camp Kilmer. And the irony of that, I was in New York City in Columbian graduate school, but my brothers and sisters, both who had fluency in Hungarian, would drive over to Camp Kilmer and work with the Hungarian refugees, the 56ers as we referred to them. And it turns out that some of them interacted with Eva and others, so it was indeed a small world. But without further ado, I'm just so delighted that both Eva and Murray and Professor Olah all agreed to participate and today. So without further ado, Jeff, please, our distinguished guests.
Could I ask people who are standing in the back, if some of you want to come in front? We have some seats still over here, some chairs around here. I know it feels a little awkward to walk through as we're talking, but in fact, it's it'll make us all more comfortable if some of you move toward the front. EvaSzorenyi was has a remarkable career that I think speaks to the intersection of art and politics in a very powerful way. And I know you have a poem that you'd like to read, but maybe you could first describe, as a 56er, where you were in 56 and how this all affected you at that moment, to give people who were not there in 56 a little feeling for it. And then afterward, we're going to hear from Professor Olah and from Murray Fromson, who has a whole other perspective on it that's very important. But could you remember, where were you?
Oh yes, I would be very happy to speak about my experiences. I am an actress, and I was at the National Theatre at Budapest for 20 years as a leading lady. This is a dramatic theatre owned by the state, like Comédie Française in Paris. And after the Soviet troops, after the first attack, the deadly attack, what they did, started October the 3rd, 23rd. After a few days, they withdrew from Hungary back to their borders. And then we thought that this is for good. Now they are out. The Russian forces are out, so the freedom fighters have won this struggle. Unfortunately, it didn't happen like that, But during those days, everywhere, in every factory, company, the people get together, and they were forming the revolutionary committees of that institution. I went there, of course, to my theater with all the other members, except the hard communists who didn't appear at that meeting. And the company, where I worked for 20 years as an actress, elected me to be the president of the Revolutionary Council. When I heard that, I was deeply honored, but I told them, look, I am a woman and I have 3 little kids. How can I do that? I am not a political figure. And they said, we want you because we know you since you were 15 years old. You are with us. We know who you are, so you have to take that. So I said, when our young people were dying on the streets by the communist forces, it was my responsibility. I was proud and happy to take this, and I did. After a few years, few days, so to say, I was sent by the union. The Actors Union had a meeting, and they sent me to the big meeting where all the heads of the Revolutionary Committee met. There were not, of course, not just from the theaters, but they were from all over, from the heavy factories of Csepel in Budapest and so on. And when I walked in that meeting, one of the workmen from Csepel Chapel is an island on the Danube where the heavy industry was, looked at me and he said, "You are still here?" I said, "Of course I am here. Why should I not be here? Don't you know that this morning the secret police started to arrest the people? First of all, the writers, the publishers. You will be the next. First the intellectuals, and then they will come for us." Well, of course, that shook me very much. I went home and I told my husband what I was told. And then the news came in from mouth to mouth. Who are the writers who are already arrested, taken? So we sat down with my sister, brother-in-law, my husband, the whole family, and we decided that both families, we have to leave the country. That was the hardest decision of my life. If I wouldn't have children, I would have never gone. I would have waited what happens. But with my 3 little boys whose future was at stake, I just had to come. I had to go. So we started out on foot, on cars, on carriages towards the border with 9 little children. My son, the oldest, was 10 years old. My sister had 6 children. The smallest was 6 months old. 2 old grandparents. And by foot, we tried twice across the border. So that's how I got involved. That's what, I didn't fight, I didn't shoot anybody, but still then, I am living here in America, and I am very, very blessed because I have an aim in my life to work for freedom of Hungary and for all the people around the world.
I want to, by the way, later talk about how you all felt as you saw the Iron Curtain finally come down. We are dedicated at this school to the principle that the pen is mightier than the sword.
Yes.
And of course, you have been a part of that. Do you want to read the poem? Do you have a poem that you wanted to read?
I would be happy. Now, the poem I would like to read is by a Hungarian poet who was a prisoner, a political prisoner for 7 years under the communist regime. His name is Tibor Tollas, and it was translated by Watson Kirkconnell. This is very well known in the Hungarian circles. I recited it many times all over the world, of the free world, because I didn't return to Hungary only after it became free again in 1998. They walled up every window. Of life without, only this gleam was left. A tiny patch of stars, a glimpse of sun. In daily gloom, within dim walls bereft, we watched the vent for this as day was done. This too they stole, this streak of sunlight, thin. They've walled up every window tight with tin. In memory's eye, I mark the azure sea at Naples, and beside the shining shore Vesuvius waits and smokes. Can you, like me, see happy sun-browned swimmers by the score? We live in night, like men who blind have been. They've walled up every window tight with tin. Our 10 mouths gasping for the missing air. 10 of us lie in one close kennel pent, as fish gills on the bank might gasp despair. To eat the food which stinks of excrement, our stomachs lack the power to begin. They walled up every window tight with tin. From the bright fragrance of the alpine peaks, the west wind blows freshness of bouquets. Of virtue to the soul that distance speaks, and smiling summits swell the hymn of praise. But thesis grips my cellmate, dark as sin. They've rolled up every window tight with tin. For us no more the steamer's whistle blows, All made their laughter from our senses wiped. No pleasure in our ears sonorous flows. No summer plays an organ, myriad piped. Our cells are deaf. All sound is dead herein. They hold up every window tight with wind. By Barcelona in a garden fair, the warm voice of a tawny woman croons. The streets are pied with dances here and there, a gay guitar ducks its tinkling tunes. Our leaden days flow silent in chagrin. They walled up every window tight with tin. We probe in darkness towards the velvet skies. As if within a coffin we were nailed. We only touch our rags and agonize or feel our hands like vermin hosts assailed. We once caressed the sunlight like soft skin. They've walled up every window tight with tin. There is a ball in London. Like a rose, a girl glides in her silks on floors that gleam. In all the bloom of lustrous hair she glows, soft mirrored in the wainscot like a dream. The West is dancing. Has it Magyarkin? They hold up every window tight with tin. Our tongues recall the pleasant pace of spring, then swallow with a groan our morsel dank, whose fecal horror chokes its entering and turns our belly sick, our reason blank. Yet, even this, our famine forces in. They've walled up every window tight with tin. Sleep locks our hungered bodies in its spell. And there I sate a gourmet's appetites on all that Paris offers. See as well climbing above the city's neon lights, the silent ghost. But here, no dawns begin. They've walled up every window tight with tin. The radios shout hoarsely of new deals, of freedom, and of justice due to man. But here, my dungeoned body only feels the million lashes of foul Stalin's plan. From Vats to far Peking, his slaves make din. Beware, beware, or through the entire world, they'll wall up every window tight with tin.
EvaSzorenyi, ladies and gentlemen. George Olah, our great Nobel laureate, and who was there at this moment. Before you begin to talk about your memories, I wonder if I could ask you, do you remember the National Theatre of Hungary?
Certainly. And Eva was really, she's too modest. She was the leading actress of Hungary. And this really meant a lot. And if anybody sacrificed, it's her. Because you see, for a scientist or a medical doctor and so on, as tragic the event was, and as fundamental was the decision to leave and try to start a new life. Write us, act us, and so on, live in the language. And I admire Eva more than I can express, not only for what she has done, but for her courage and spirit. Because speaking about myself, look, I am not a hero. I never in my lifetime fired the fire out. But this was a spontaneous explosion. We called it a revolution in '56. Nobody planned it. certainly not the CIA or whatever they claimed that this was done. It was an absolutely spontaneous event. I was on the faculty of the Technical University and also in a new research institute of the Academy of Sciences. And I wasn't fighting in the street, but we all supported what happened. And my colleague elected me to the Revolutionary Committee, as it was called. And I never for a minute thought that this is something which you do with any other reason than to express your support. And when, as Eva said, the Hungarian Revolution was crashed, 200,000 young, or relatively young Hungarians walked out because the future looked exceedingly dim. And we started a new life. And with my family, with my wife and my 3-year-old son, we found a new country and started a new life. And we are now Americans of Hungarian origin. My 2 sons and my grandchildren are really Americans. My 2 sons believe they speak some Hungarian, but you shouldn't take this too seriously. But still, this country gave us a new chance to start a new life. America is still welcoming people from around the world and gives them a chance to start a new life.
What led you, the moment when you left Hungary, what was it that said to you, I have to leave?
Look, we weren't planning. We walked out practically with the shirt on our back. It was a realization that the future looked exceedingly dim. I never, or my wife, we never thought that in our lifetime this will change. It was brutally crashed, and it was a question of shock. And the Iron Curtain was down for a brief while. And probably, you see, the Russians were very clever. They realized that this happened not by some foreign intervention. This was a spontaneous explosion. And in order to let steam off, to let the pressure off, they, for a brief while, let people to get out, which decreased the pressure. But for a small country of 10 million people, the loss of 200,000 people, who mostly at the time were young or relatively young people, was a terrible loss. But I don't think that any I knew was really planning this or doing this with any thought-out way, how and what to do. The last I would like to say, you know, I'm a chemist, I'm a scientist, and therefore the readjustment was relatively easy. You see, science has its own language. We knew a little, or we thought we knew a little English, a variation of what. We first got out to England, and I remember distinctly, in December 1956, a friend to whom I knew from the literature invited me to give a lecture at Cambridge University. And it's the first time in my life I lectured in English. Or at least I thought I am lecturing. And at the end, this was chemistry, and of course there's a lot of international names. But at the end, somebody remarked, and I understand I wasn't the first one. Leo Szilard had this experience. But anyhow, I experienced, somebody said, now this was quite interesting, a lecture. I didn't understand much, but it's remarkable that this strange language, Hungarian, has some words which strangely resemble. You know what I'm trying to say, that in my field, for scientists, physicians, and so on, the adjustment to a life was much more easier. Regardless, I am very grateful to this country which gave us the opportunity, and I am here for 29 years at USC. I feel a member of the of the Trojan family. And maybe I have done a little, both in education and research, to pay off some of the debt I still feel. It's a great pleasure here, and I admire Bob Filep, who was essential to arrange this. These pictures, which will be exhibited, are remarkable. It's done by a real artist, and don't forget, in 1956, television did not exist, certainly not in Hungary. So photojournalism was really what projected this picture in the world.
Well, we're all indebted to you, our great Nobel Laureate, George Olah.
You reflect that I used to be 6 and 5. I am shrinking now. I am just an average guy who had a good fortune.
Murray Fromson, who was a great correspondent for Associated Press and for CBS before coming to USC, where he also was the director of the School of Journalism and is professor of journalism, had a very interesting experience outside of Hungary, looking at this revolution. Maybe you could describe that, Murray.
If I could set the scene, which is very important to know, 1956 was a very important year. It was a year that Khrushchev went to the Soviet Presidium and denounced Stalin. And when the Hungarian Revolution took place, there were rumbles throughout Eastern Europe saying, what did Khrushchev do? Did he set in motion this kind of uprising that took place? The description of what went on was described by 2 reporters in Hungary, Andre and Imre Marton, working for the Associated Press and the United Press. Their daughter, Kati Marton, is the daughter, and she was a child in Budapest.
Right.
Kati Marton is the wife of Richard Holbrooke, right, former UN ambassador. And so we've talked about this a lot. And I happened to read their dispatches when I was in Melbourne, Australia. The other thing I wanted to say to set the scene is, yes, the Russians pulled out after the first crackdown. But the reason they came back was because on October the 29th and 30th, the Anglo-French-Israeli attack on Suez took place. And the Soviets thought that with the world caught in such an uproar over that, they could come back into Hungary and crush the rebellion, which is what happened. They sent in their tanks and their troops and so forth. Well, I was a young reporter for the Associated Press in Singapore, and somebody had pulled out a personnel file and said, well, yeah, you started out as a sports writer. So they sent me to Melbourne. And I was there for the games and all these other...
For the Olympic Games.
Olympic
This was the Olympic
right.
Games in Melbourne.
By the way, is Laszlo Tabori here by any chance?
We're hoping you would
Laszlo
be.
Tabori was a great 1,500-meter runner for Hungary who defected. And he is a part-time instructor here on the track and field team. And I saw him last year here. Anyway, so I got to Melbourne and I had all these sports writers who were much more senior to me. But I was looking for the political things that were going on. And that's how finally one day I said to the Associated Press bureau chief, I said, you know, maybe some of the Hungarians are not going to go home. And he said, who finished third in the 100-meter dash? That's what we're interested in. So I took my lunch hour and I went over to the American consulate. And I had a conversation with the consulate. And I said, after hearing him talk, I said, have any of the Hungarians indicated they might want to defect after the games were over? He said, I thought nobody would ever ask me. And it turned out that there were 47 athletes out of the 127 members of the Hungarian team that did want to defect. And the Hungarian emigre community in Australia was very active in trying to encourage and help these people who were really wanted to leave. A lot of them actually were in Hungary, had crossed the border into Hungary after the first rebellion, and they wanted to go back to help fight the revolution. But the KGB put them on planes and sent them to Australia to be part of the team. So the defection took place against the background. It was the first real Cold War Olympics. It's the first time politics really played a part in the games. So there were these 46 people, Hungarian athletes, who chose to defect. 35 came to the United States, the rest stayed in Australia. And it was a fantastic moment because so much else was going on in the games having to deal with Hungary. The Hungarian water polo team was probably it was the best in the world. It had won the Olympic Games in the previous, in 1952 in Helsinki. So they were defending the championship, and there was a semifinal match with the Russians. And I said, I've got to go cover that match. And the AP bureau chief said, water polo. Water polo. So again, I dragged another reporter, and we went to it, and we were the only two reporters there from the West covering this. And the pool absolutely turned red with blood. I mean, they were just, the athletes on both sides were just killing each other, and a Russian poked the eye out of a Hungarian athlete. It was really terrible. But there were so many Hungarian emigres in the swimming stadium, and they were just cheering on the Hungarian team. And then when Hungarians won 4-0, and it was really, they really were getting back at the Russians. They won 4-0, and then the Hungarians tore down the old communist flag and put up the flag of the Hungarian Republic from before the communists took over. So it was very dramatic. And when the defection took place, there were the other athletes. What was going to happen to them? Well, I went to the airport in Melbourne to see what was going to happen. And there were many more Hungarians who wanted to leave, decided they wanted to follow the lead of the other defectors. But the KGB dragged them onto the plane. It was a terrible moment. And I look back now, and I went to Google the other day, and there's about this much mentioned about those defections. It was just not the kind of thing that people were, they were so caught up with this, with the Suez issue and what was happening there, the British, the French, and the Israelis attacking Egypt to recapture the Suez Canal from total Egyptian control. And that was another sidebar issue that was really fantastic because the French and the British had approached the Israelis to take part in this, and the Israelis were very hesitant. They didn't want to be portrayed as part of a colonial expedition against Suez. But the French gave the Israelis the nuclear secret, and that was why they participated. And that's changed the whole dynamics of the Middle East today. So,
an incredible digression that we'd also love to talk about. But you mentioned, Murray, in the course of it, the importance of a counsel's office.
yeah.
And we have here with us the Hungarian Council, and we're very privileged to have you with us, sir. And I would like to reflect, if we could, for a moment on the fact that we have this remarkable Hungarian group of Hungarians who came to Los Angeles. Los Angeles has always been a major center for Hungarians. And in fact, when I headed the Voice of America, one of the people in the Voice of America office here in Westwood hosted a morning show every day, co-hosted with somebody in Washington, a morning show in Hungarian for Hungary from Los Angeles as they were representing how important the Hungarian community is in Los Angeles. Maybe you could reflect for a moment on the Hungarian community in Los Angeles and how it became so important in the community you all came to join.
Thank you very much. I'm the Consul General of Hungary in Los Angeles. Actually, this is my second year, so it's quite fresh because the territory which we are covered, practically half of the United States from Los Angeles. But definitely, Los Angeles is the center point for us as I work and with the Hungarian communities and all consular affairs and bilateral relations, which is also in our hands in many ways. So, as far as I know, we have, according to the last census, American census in 2000, there are about 1.4 million American citizens of Hungarian descent. Believe me or not, even in Alaska we have more than 2,000. In California, more than 100,000. And we were just talking about that, how many of these speak Hungarian. And well, officially we don't know, but at least 1/3. It means that at least 30,000, 35,000 people still actively speaking Hungarian language. And we just also talked about 47,000 Hungarians as refugees were accepted in 56, 57, and out of them, approximately 10,000 are luckily with us and living in California or in the West Coast, better to say. You know, I would just like to tell you that Well, I'm a professional diplomat. I was grown up in the communist regime and served my country, and so it's a personal remark that, of course, it was not easy to come to the United States for me because we were learning a lot about America. And now I'm just comparing what I learned, what is reality. So that's an interesting experience. Also, when I first came here, I was approached by some Hungarians, and we were talking about the past a little bit and what is going on today. And of course, we were talking about certain names. And I said, okay, I'm sorry, I don't know that person. I don't know who is he. You should know, because you have the files in your consulate. Well, I tell you frankly, we have no files on Hungarians.
Thank God, not anymore.
Well, I don't know what was in the past. I don't know. Really, I don't know, but today we don't have it. It's a problem. And just as almost a joke, of course I visited my colleagues. And the Hungarian consulate is in the same building where the Swiss consulate. And I met my Swiss colleague, and we were just talking about these problems, how to find a certain person, as a consular task, to find somebody. Let's say the relatives died or the parents died, and we have to trace, where to see for legal issues and other things. And the Swiss consul general told me that they have no problem, because every Swiss citizen is registered with the consulate. I said, well, we don't have any registration. I said, why do you register? I asked him. Because if there is a war, they should know where are the Swiss. So, I'm sorry, that's a reality. So about the Hungarian communities, I tell you, I'm trying to visit all the Hungarian different organizations, different churches. So we have a lot of little Hungarian communities. Very unfortunately, it's very difficult to bring them together.
Well, the one point I wanted to highlight about Hollywood, about Los Angeles, is that in Hollywood, one of the great communities has been the Hungarian community. And among the names that everybody knows are the Gabor sisters, for example,
yes.
But also Alexander Korda. There were many leading Hungarians who were part of the community that built the Hollywood, and I think that we can take a great deal of pride in what they've contributed to Los Angeles. Before I open this to ask other people to participate, I thought Nick Cull could talk about an interesting aspect of the revolution, because I think you can do this. Nick is our professor of public diplomacy who has just finished a book about the USIA. Well, Radio Free Europe and Radio Liberty were not a part of the USIA. Voice of America was a part of the USIA. But there was, and even in the poem that you read, there was a mention of radio, and radio talking about freedom. And there was a moment in 1956 when the Radio Free Europe, broadcasting in Hungary, seemed to be fomenting a revolution, indicating that there would be American support, which of course never came. It's a very sad day in history. I of course headed the Voice of America. It's a very sad day in the history of international broadcasting. Somewhat disputed. Nick, I don't know if you remember this or can you shed any light on it?
Well, I came along because I sort of hoped that maybe the panelists could talk about their radio experiences and what they heard, but it's very, very difficult to sort out exactly what happened. It seems that, well, first of all, you should talk about, it's important to understand the incredible significance of radio, international radio, for people who were living behind the Iron Curtain at this time. As a little example of this, in July '56, when there's a riot in Poland, the first thing that the people do is they go and knock down the radio jamming station so that they can hear the radio more clearly. In the autumn of '56, there were a number of broadcasts going into Hungary. Radio Free Europe, who were investigated after the conclusion of the revolution, it was found that some of their broadcasts included broadcasts that were clearly encouraging a revolution because they were actually broadcasting guerrilla warfare instructions, how to make Molotov cocktails, how to put up roadblocks, all sorts of things that would be useful in street fighting. Voice of America had were exonerated by internal investigations. But the really interesting thing to me is that the Voice of America people that I spoke to acted as though they were encouraging revolution in Hungary, and thereafter they were terrified about this, and there was tremendous restraint and responsibility on international broadcasters based on the Hungarian experience. They were very, very worried. Something they said could encourage people to rise up and expose themselves to danger.
And the reason this would be so bad is because there would be the implication that people might have derived from this that that they were going to be supported, that the revolution was being supported in some other way by the United States, which was not in fact the case. That's
May I say a word here? Well, I heard myself Radio Free Europe during the fights. Maybe it was the second or the third day of the fighting. Radio Free Europe said, "Hold out, Hungarians, hold out. We are coming. We are helping you." Myself heard that. That's the truth.
One of the other problem that confuses the situation is that the KGB were also doing broadcasts which were claiming to be American broadcasts, promising exactly what you're saying. So it's very difficult to tell whether somebody is listening to Voice of America, Radio Free Europe, or a fake KGB broadcast designed to increase disillusionment with the West by promising something that couldn't be delivered.
The head of the KGB operation in Eastern Europe was Yuri Andropov.
Yeah, that's it.
Wow, really?
Yeah, but look, what Eva said, I remember too. At the same time, I never heard anything which would have, in advance, encouraged people to revolt or uprising. It was simply that when the fighting was going on, it was said, "You brave people, hang on, because help is coming." That's all. That's at least all I can remember. And it's very different because it wasn't really anything which was done in advance to start with. It was a spontaneous explosion.
But what is interesting is that whatever the lesson was, it certainly wasn't applied in Iraq at the end of the First Gulf War, when the United States was explicitly encouraging the Shia people to rebel.
Good point.
And there is this lesson that as far as the Americans were concerned, that was learnt in Hungary, was then sustained through the Cold War. But then, as the Cold War came to an end, it was forgotten.
We have in the room other people, I think, who have memories of this, of 1956. Could I just ask for hands first of people who were 56ers or 57ers? So maybe I could ask the other 56ers to speak. Do you want to tell your story for a moment?
Well, there you told me almost everything what I have experienced. But anyway, I was 18 years old, during the revolution. So
maybe you could introduce yourself too, so everybody knows.
Well, I remember, I just came out from the school, chemical technical school. I mentioned Professor Olah. Well, what I remember, I lived in the section 8, which is a Nyolc kerület. I don't know, it's Hungarian, you know what I mean?
Like an arrondissement in Paris.
Yeah, and the headquarters of the Communist Party was there. And my parents warned me so many times, don't go here, don't go there. I was 18. I know that so many other 15, 16 years old, boys was fighting. I was not a hero. I was just for the revolution, for the uprising. But somehow I sneak out to the area where was a Communist Party headquarters, in Tisza Kálmán tér. I don't know anybody's remember that.
Sure.
And also there was this terrible thing what you saw. The second, when they came back, the Russian, and they hanged up so many people who were there, which actually one of my best friends was hanging over there, and that was the reason I decided to left and go away. And I told my parents, you know, and they was crying, you know, and we went together about nine guys, 18 to 20, to left to Hungary. And the story that I went through, probably heard that, you know, we get there to the border, you know, all the times he stopped us and they want to take us back. And so the nicest, but one more thing I want to just mention to you, we passed 2 borders. So we didn't stay to Vienna, I mean in Austria. It took us to next to Salzburg somewhere, it was a camp. And we sneaked out to Germany. One of our priests helped us, 9 of us. And we was actually the first Hungarian. They called us, and they told us, you know, we are a revolutionary. It was not that, it was a newspaper and that time the television. And they took us to the CIA over there, and they was asking questions because they want to know what's was wrong, what's happening in Hungary. And certainly we didn't. We told them everything. How big was the tank? You know, what kind of armor they had. But we was just the kids. We didn't know that. And anyway, they kept us over there a few days. And it was a funny story. We never seen a black man ever. You know, it was 1956. And they put us in the little small Volkswagen, 9 of us, like this, and they took us to the CIA headquarters. And one of the guys said to us, "Hey, I've never seen a black man pick some kind of language, you know, it's how strong gonna be this guy." And they answered back perfect Hungarian.
He was from Cleveland.
Shocked. He was shocked.
He was from Cleveland.
No, it was Cleveland. How did you speak like that? What are you talking about him?
We lived in Cleveland.
There was a black guy, really dark, and he spoke like we do. I said, "Guys, I don't care what you're saying. We don't, you know, just where we gonna go. Everybody speaks every language, so watch out your language."
In back, there was one other person who was 56er. Did you want to tell your story quickly?
It's a member of Eva's committee.
A member of Eva's committee.
Yeah.
Yes. Well, I was the student at the Technical University, 4th year of electrical engineering, when the revolution broke out. In the previous summer, I had the good fortune of being a member of a small team of students that went to Poland, and for the first time, we learned about the truth about the Polish events, because in '56 there were events in Poznan. And we also visited the Lenin works. From eventually the same place, Lech Walesa emerged as an electrician and politician. So it was a very interesting 2 weeks I spent in Poland. And when I came back in mid-August, their team was yet to come, the student team, to Hungary. And I already announced to my family and others that something is in the air, something is going to happen soon. Indeed, it did. I was there at the October 22nd event in the Technical University. It had a huge area where all the students were able to gather, and I witnessed the whole thing. What was decided that evening about, the decision was about the demonstration of sympathy with the Polish. That's how it started. So, and it's not insignificant that the marchers, you know, we were arm in arm so that no provocateur could get into our ranks. And we marched along the Danube all the way to Ben Square. Why Bem? Because Joseph Bem was an immigrant in 1849 who was a general in the Hungarian army fighting for independence from the Habsburgs in those days. So that was the beginning. Of course, it's a long series of events. Unless you also know what the causes were for the revolution, you're not really understanding this at all. Some people very summarily say, well, you know, you're a Hungarian, of course you're a rebel, you know, that's your nature. But that's not quite the same as you know, if you follow the events that led up to that revolution. And someone made a comment about the Olympics, the water polo team, and the bloody fight. And actually, a movie has already been made. It was made by Americans, the great siblings, Colleen and Meg. And it's already ready and will be coming out this year. And it draws a parallel between the water polo events at the Melbourne Olympics and the revolution and the fights going on in Budapest.
And you did some voiceover for that, didn't you?
Yes, we all did. We helped them.
Yeah.
One of the
The
things
film is
that,
entitled Freedom's Fury. And that's not the only movie that is being made. This is already done, and the makers are traveling in a few days to Budapest to do some marketing. I advise you to go and see.
We only have about 5 minutes left, and I do want to do one other thing. That's did you want to do something else you want to tell us about how when you left? Because I want to bring to one other topic.
How I left? Well, I was in ROTC in Hungary. It was a compulsory thing. And I was being trained to be the signal corps officer. So when the revolution won, that was the only time that I joined the National Guard, which was being founded just then for that purpose, to protect the results of the revolution. And I went into the university, and there was the headquarters for Signal Corps, the Technical University, and I worked there until the 3rd, which was a Saturday. By then it was pretty obvious that the Soviet forces were coming all over through the borders. We had the news, and on the 4th, I went back to my post, but the place was ordered to be emptied out, any resistance. And for several days, we stayed there and continued the work, the Signal Corps.
Yo, again, yo, Christian.
So, because I was captured there by Soviet troops, and I was able to talk my life, you know, they could not find our weapons, and that's the reason I was able to be let out. And
I want to just finish, because I do promise people these sessions end by 12, but people can stay and continue to talk to each other. But I want to talk about the pictures for a moment, because we are here to talk about the pictures, and maybe you could spend a moment talking about this remarkable collection.
Sure. This fall, in Doheny Library in the ground floor, we are going to be exhibiting about 40 to 50 of the photos that Erich Lessing took during those 2 weeks, some of which are on display here. This is actually a pretty difficult curatorial task that I and my colleague Andrew Wolf here are working on, because Lessing took about 200 or 300, I believe, altogether, and they're really stunning. They're quite remarkable photos. They're poignant, they're agonizing. You can see this kind of giddiness in the people in these 2 weeks, that 2 or 3 weeks that they had taken back the country. And then you see the aftermath as well, and how despairing it is. So I encourage everyone to come by in the fall. Will be up from September 17th through December. And I definitely want to thank Dr. Filep, Eva, and Dr. Olah for bringing this to our attention. It's really serendipitous that we have a couple of 56ers here that can work with us on this. We're also going to have some additional programming. The photographer, Erich Lessing, is still alive, and he is coming over from Austria for the 17th and 18th, and on sometime on the afternoon of the 18th, we'll be having a program over in Doheny Library where he can talk about the photographs, so I invite everybody there. And that's it.
Bob, do you want to make...
something to that,
Please, go ahead.
There's a book coming out of his work just about the Hungarian Revolution, which will be about different languages, about 260. By the way, he took many more than the 200 or 300. But the book will contain, I don't know exactly, about 250 or so pictures, which will be by then available, as I said, in different languages.
Or maybe we can arrange to have it at the bookstore here. It would be wonderful if it was available in the bookstore. I do promise to end this, but Bob, I want to see, do you have any concluding things? You brought this together, and
Definitely on the photos, one person commented, you really didn't know what was going on. When I first saw the full range, I went on the website and looked at the whole 250, and they were before, during, and after. And I got to talk with Lessing, and I said, it looks like you did, and this is to re-anchor it back to photojournalism, if you will. It looked like you were there before, during, and after, but your technique reminded me of István Kertész, the great Hungarian photographer, and he said to me on the phone, he said, he was my idol. Kertész was my idol, but he said, what I've been able to do, even with the photos that you're going to see in Doheny, is to take advantage of the digital technology and create additional pixels and additional shadings of light and dark. So you're in for a real treat, and I urge you to see it. And one additional credit for Eva, going back to Ferenc, how many of you have driven on 6th Street past MacArthur's Park and Cardinal Mindszenty Square? Right. How many of you know that there's a statue there dedicated to the 56ers, which is about 4 stories high, Eva?
56 feet.
56 feet, all right. Well, depending on how you build California style or English Baroque, anyway, it's pretty tall. And Eva and her group, the Freedom Fighters, established that monument, raised with coffee cultures and cookie sales and all that jazz, raised the money to build that thing. And this is another credit absolutely to her. And they have been celebrating every October 23rd at that monument, and there will be again. You can count on it, even if it doesn't rain. Even if it rains, there'll be a celebration on the 23rd.
Probably a special one, October 23rd,
oh,
this year.
Awesome.
Murray, you had a brief last comment?
And a brief thing, not Hungarian, but it is the Cold War, and it wasn't the Olympics, and it was the romance between Olga Petkova, the discus thrower from Czechoslovakia, and Hal Connolly, the American hammer thrower. The Czechs allowed her to come to the United States. A year later, he went back to Prague, and they got married, and they were married for 30 years or something like that. She was a coach here in Santa Monica School District for many years. She lives in Orange County now.
Professor Olah, any last?
No, it's a real pleasure that there will be different commemorations. And I honestly believe this 56 event in Hungary really started the disintegration of the communist empire.
EvaSzorenyi, any last comments?
Well, I'm very grateful that I was able to come here. I'm grateful to God that He gave me strength at my age to be still here and seeing you. And I hope that you will come this year to our celebration, if you feel with us, for freedom for all the people.
Thank you all for your courage and your inspiration.